It was a tragedy that rocked the nation.
And in breaking news, the police in Greymouth say they're on their way to the Pike River coal mine after receiving reports of an explosion there.
They say that there are between 25 and 30 miners unaccounted for.
It was the news that many had expected and which all had dreaded.
5 explosions, 29 lives lost, and that was just the beginning.
The Mines Rescue Service is warning of long delays before any work is done to get back into the Pike River mine.
The Royal Commission into the Pike River mine explosion has been told the mine was a disaster waiting to happen.
Are they owed an apology?
I don't think so.
WorkSafe says it fully accepts the Supreme Court's ruling that a decision not to prosecute the boss of the Pike River coal mine was unlawful.
Families of the men killed in the Pike River disaster say they have no intention of stopping their protests.
A manned re-entry into the Pike River mine will go ahead.
Winston Peters made finding the truth at Pike River an election bottom line in 2017. Today, with the mine about to be sealed, he says the government never finished the job.
Kia ora, I'm Davina Zimmer, and on The Detail today, the complex, complicated, convoluted tale of the Pike River mine tragedy.
Each wave of new developments in Pike has led to another new wave of developments in Pike. It has just kept on rolling on with disappointment and betrayal after disappointment and betrayal for the families.
Why families are still fighting for accountability 15 years later, and how a new feature film could aid their fight.
We should always, I think, question those in power, and I would like to think that the movie can help activate some people. Essentially, if you watch it and you see what Sonia and Anna, two quote-unquote ordinary women, could do, the impact that they actually had, then you can do it too.
That's Rob Sarkis, the director of Pike River, the movie, talking about what he hopes people will take from the film. We'll hear more from him in a moment. But first, Rebecca McPhee, an award-winning journalist and author of the book Tragedy at Pike River Mine.
It was very clear, I guess, over the first days subsequent to this, very, very shocking news that emerged on a Friday afternoon, that this was always going to have been a catastrophe that should not have happened. I had done quite a lot of health and safety writing in earlier years, and so I knew from the beginning really not to call this an accident. An accident implies that there's no fault, if you like, and that was not the case here.
The Royal Commission's just released report on the Pike River coal mine tragedy blames the company's drive for production before the mine was ready. The report has prompted the Minister of Labour, Kate Wilkinson, to quit her portfolio. It says Pike River Coal exposed its workers to unacceptable risks, not paying enough attention to health and safety.
A leading constitutional lawyer says families of Pike River victims are entitled to feel aggrieved at the latest findings on the disaster. An independent report released this week decided that systemic rather than individual failures were to blame for the explosion which killed 29 men. It went on to say no individual government officials should be held to blame.
There has never really been any sort of accountability, has there?
No, sort of the opposite, really. Just an appalling breach of public trust, really, exemplified particularly by the dismissal of charges against the chief executive of the mine and the person who had been the absolute driving force of it since it began, which is Peter Whittle, who became the chief executive towards the end, but had been in there as the mine manager and really the driver of getting the thing off the ground.
Why were those charges dismissed?
Well, he was charged on a number of counts under the Health and Safety Act, along with the company itself, Pike River Coal, and one of the largest subcontractors who had been working underground at the mine. That company pleaded guilty, and Pike River Coal, the company, also didn't resist those charges, but the company was really just a hollow shell by then, because 3 weeks after the explosion, the company was broke and there was no money to pay a fine or the reparations that were ordered by the court to the 29 families. But in parallel, at that time, Peter Whittle was also charged as an officer of the company for a number of breaches of health and safety procedures and standards. And he pleaded not guilty, and there was an expectation that it would go to trial probably in 2014. But that never happened.
All 12 health and safety charges against the man who was chief executive when the mine blew up in 2010 were dropped today in the Christchurch District Court. The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment says ultimately that's because of the low likelihood of convicting Mr Whittle, the only individual charged over the blasts.
That decision was fought tooth and nail through the courts, led by Anna Osborne and Sonia Rockhouse, who are the two key characters in the new Pike River film that's just coming out. They were supported by Helen Kelly, the late leader of the Council of Trade Unions, to take a judicial review against that decision, and fought it all the way to the Supreme Court. And in 2017, the Supreme Court declared that that decision was unlawful because it amounted to a bargain to stifle a prosecution.
And so you would think that if something was deemed unlawful, things would go back to trial, or am I wrong there?
No, that's not what happens. It's a declaration, really. It's hard to get your head around because people would sort of automatically think, oh, well, then doesn't the clock start on that again, or doesn't that process start again? But that's not what happened. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but a judicial review is a process to examine whether the procedures of the law have been complied with. But it wasn't an opportunity of itself to relaunch the charges.
So basically it was saying, okay, what happened all those years ago shouldn't have happened, but this man has still gotten off.
Yes. And then, the each wave of new developments in Pike has led to another new wave of developments in Pike. It has just kept on rolling on with disappointment and betrayal after disappointment and betrayal for the families, really. But the significant thing that happened after the Supreme Court decision in 2017 was the decision of the then Labour New Zealand First government to mount a project to re-enter the mine.
Winston Peters wants to be the first to go back into Pike River mine. The New Zealand First leader says if it's good enough for safety experts to re-enter, then it's good enough for him.
To see if bodies could be recovered, but equally important, if not more so, to forensically examine the mine drift. And that led then to the opportunity for the police to reopen an investigation, a criminal investigation. Now, just to complicate matters further, the police had initially investigated back in the years after the explosion and had concluded in 2013 that they could not proceed with a criminal prosecution because at that time the health and safety charges against Peter Whittle were still live at that point, and so it was deemed that it would be double jeopardy to proceed with the criminal charges against him while he was facing the health and safety charges. And we now know that at the very time that the police made that decision, the bargaining that was going on in the background to have the health and safety charges dismissed were already happening. So what we got at that point was both no police charges and also no health and safety charges. So then coming forward again to 2018, when the project to re-enter the mine was underway, the police then reopened their file and began a whole new, extremely extensive investigation, which has gone on for a number of years, and it's achieved a lot.
But Rebecca worries things are backtracking.
I sometimes feel that it's being forgotten. I think that's why the film that's just coming out now is so important, because it does bring the knowledge of this catastrophe back into public consciousness.
Right, guys, listen up. Ben, you up with Joe.
Is it even legal?
17 yesterday!
They enjoying it down there?
Yeah, loving it. This is a good job for him. Don't go in tomorrow.
I have to. We're way behind.
You heard from the boys?
No, why?
There were 35 miners down in the mine. They don't know exactly what happened at the moment.
I didn't necessarily know I wanted to make a movie about Pike River. I knew I was interested in Pike River, but, a movie is another thing. I mean, for a start, it's a massive time investment. I've been working on this for about 7 years now. And so you don't take it lightly. You've also, if you're going to make a movie, especially a New Zealand movie, you need to get funding. You need to, there's so many hoops to jump. It's a massive thing. It takes over your life.
This is Rob Sarkis, director of the film.
A friend of mine, Tony Sartorius, he had been working directly with Sonia and Anna, helping them with their campaign. So Tony calls me and tells me this incredible story of what they're actually up to in real time. I met them at the Backbencher pub on the day that Jacinda Ardern became the leader of Labour. And I thought about their story, and I told them to their faces that I just thought that they were heroic in what they were doing, and I was very interested. However, I did not think at that point there was a movie in there because it didn't have an ending. I didn't want to make promises about making a movie that I couldn't keep. Fast forward a couple of months later, like the rest of the country, I was sitting in front of the telly waiting for Winston Peters to make his decision in 2017. What way is he going to go, National or Jacinda Ardern's Labour? And he made his decision, Jacinda, Labour. And almost immediately I got a text from Tony Sartorius, my friend, "Got your ending? ? And that was the beginning of what became the Pike River film. Right from the get-go, it was super important for me and for Fiona, the writer, that we engaged with the families. And so really all that we did was went through an exercise of listening. We asked families who wanted to talk to us about their experience in order to make a movie to contact us. We didn't push ourselves onto them. They contacted us if they wanted to talk, and many did. And we sat down, cups of tea, like hundreds of hours of interviews. It was sitting down years after the tragedy and just listening. And that word, it's like, it feels like that's the one word that the powerful, who I guess are the antagonists of this film, forgot to listen to the families and understand their needs. And often their needs were simply to be told the truth. But for years, sometimes with good intent, I think, they weren't told the truth.
Almost 15 years since the Pike River mine disaster, Pike River the movie is premiering in Greymouth tonight.
It felt big. Of course it felt big because, you were potentially bringing trauma back to that community, which was not the intent. And actually, I think, overall not the result either, because the film's about a fight for justice. But it is always going to have a period early on where we're reliving the worst day of their lives. And when I say their lives, I don't just mean the families, I mean that whole community. So I was aware of the weight of it, but actually what I loved about the experience was it was kind of joyful at the same time. Everyone dressed up and came to this premiere. Like we were, Rowdy, who's one of the Pike River miners who helped us with the film actually, he was our mining advisor. He lost his son in the mine and was one of the Pike River miners. And he stood up at the end of our shoot and spoke to the crew. And he said to the crew that not much good has ever come of Pike. It's a shitty thing. It makes him feel bad, awful, for obvious reasons. But he really felt that being involved in the film was a positive experience in relation to Pike River, which was an incredibly rare thing for him. And I felt the same thing for the community when we premiered in Greymouth. 450 people laughing and crying together. It was, I'll never forget it.
What was the most difficult part about this movie?
So the hardest thing about making this movie was the period of time after we'd written the script, as we were financing it, when we didn't know whether we would be making it. I was never able to promise, because I've done this, it's not my first rodeo, I was never able to promise to the families that a movie would definitely come out of those many hours of interviews and discussions. But, of course, they all hoped something would come out of it. And I didn't want to be another person of, some power, I guess, in the media, who made implicit promises and then didn't deliver. So there was one day 2.5 years ago where the Film Commission were making their decision. I mean, I just had a sleepless night because I knew that when I went to bed the next night, either we were making the Pike River movie or we weren't. And the thought of letting these families and this story down because it was out of my control was just... I couldn't sleep. I could just pace I paced that whole day. And as I was walking to pick up my son that day, I was walking up the road and there was the most beautiful rainbow. And I sort of thought to myself, well, that's a sign. And within an hour, we had the decision from the Film Commission and we were making our movie.
The remains of 8 Pike River miners have now been found.
Families of the Pike River miners.
The 29 miners.
Only half of them are miners. Most of them were contractors, tradies, who were building the mine. And it's one of the things that we forget. They're referred to as miners. They're referred to as the 29. We kind of have, the collective we, have this image of what that is, I suppose, but it almost just becomes a kind of a number. It's disassociated from something personal. And I guess what a film, I think, can do, and it certainly did it for me when I was shooting it, to humanise those 29, actually 31, because there were 2 who are very much victims of this who escaped. To humanise them is hugely powerful so that they don't become the 29 miners, quote unquote. And it was day 2 of our shoot, and it was the first time that I and the whole crew and Sonia, Anna, Rowdy and other families saw 29 men, most of them locals from Greymouth, dressed up in their Pike River gear, standing in front of us. Proper big men, like workers. I'd been working on the film for 5 years to that point. We'd written the images. We knew what we were about to shoot, but to see it in front of you was just so shocking. Sonia and Anna were just completely stunned. They sort of shocked, it's there they were.
What impact do you hope this film will have?
There's an aspect of the story when you see the movie which shows a baton being passed. Specifically, Helen Kelly held this baton of activism. She was a woman, she was strong, she was articulate, she knew how to get results. She got involved in the Pike River story, got involved with Sonia and Anna as she was dying, in fact, and passed the baton to them.
Do you want to fight this? Are you for a judge?
In the matter now before the court, a decision has been made that this prosecution is not going to proceed.
The mine will be permanently sealed. That's the reality.
No one is going to go in the earth again.
So what are you going to do?
We're going to stop them.
Consciously or unconsciously, I'm not sure, but they took that baton. And after Helen passed, they ran with that baton, really ran with that baton, which is essentially what the movie, particularly the last third of the movie, is about. And they achieved results through action, through using their voice. And what I hope for the movie is that baton that they ran with, Sonia and Anna, through the movie perhaps, can be passed to anyone who wants to take it.
What's next? Rebecca, where do you see things heading?
Well, the big what's next is what will emerge out of the police investigation and whether charges will be laid, and if so, what are they and against whom. And that decision is pending. We don't know when that will come. It was thought that it would have come by now, but it hasn't. We know it's with the Crown Prosecutor and with Crown Law. Sad to say that the record of Crown Law on large, complex investigations like this is not great in terms of taking bold decisions in the public interest, and we need only to think about the collapse of the flawed CTV building in the Christchurch earthquakes where 115 people were killed as an example of that. In that case, the police saw and had grounds to prosecute the designers of that building, and Crown Law snuffed that out.
Will the movie help with this fight for accountability?
I think so. I think at the end of the day, accountability isn't just about what a bunch of officials or people in power do about an issue or about an injustice. It is about what we collectively as a society feel is acceptable. And people can't have an informed view of that without understanding the story. My book is one source of that understanding. It came out in 2013. This movie is really a very contemporary and up-to-date examination of the post-explosion story and all of the many ways in which the families have been really deceived and betrayed. And the question of accountability via the justice system is absolutely central to the story in the movie. This is fundamentally about justice and about how we conduct ourselves as a country. I think at the end of the day, the question for everybody, not just the families, not just Anna and Sonia, is, are we okay with this? Are we okay that a company that was, literally incompetent, that was literally deceiving its workers and its investors, that was literally in breach of the rules that still existed at that time governing mining, is it okay that they blow up their asset, kill 29 workers in an entirely 100% avoidable catastrophe, and that nothing happens? Are we okay with that? That's the question we have to keep on asking ourselves. I'm personally not okay with that, and I don't think when New Zealanders understand that that is the story, that they are okay with it either.
That's all for today. Pike River the movie will be released in New Zealand cinemas next Thursday. Thank you to Rebecca McPhee and Rob Sarkis for joining me. The music used in this podcast was composed by Carl Sove-Stephen for the film and forms part of the soundtrack which he is releasing. This episode was produced by Gwen McClure and engineered by Mark Chesterman. I'm Davina Zimmer. Ka kite.